After the outstanding release and reception of Killzone 2, the developers at Guerrilla Games knew they were going to have their work cut out for them for the follow-up. A follow-up that was already in the early stages of development even before the second game ever released. At this point, the Killzone brand had garnered a bit of a reputation for creating hype after the whole Killzone 2 E3 trailer debacle, and by early 2010, Killzone 3 was already generating rumors of its existence and development roughly a year after Killzone 2's release. There was talk about Killzone 3 pushing the PS3 to its absolute limit, and even utilizing 100% of the console's capabilities thanks to their proprietary graphics engine. Shortly thereafter, a full reveal trailer hit the market and generated even more hype, and a multiplayer beta even launched later that same year. Then, only 2 short years after the release of Killzone 2, Killzone 3 hit the market hard with a climactic conclusion to the Killzone trilogy. The gap between the release of the second and third game is obviously much smaller than the one between the first and the second game, but don't let that fool you into thinking that the game has suffered from that in any major way. I'll go ahead and tell you right now that this game is awesome. It's got bigger set pieces, more action, higher stakes, and even manages to bring a powerful conclusion to players that have become invested in the plot threads of the second game. And that seems like it would make it the best one so far, but there were a few decisions made for Killzone 3 that really affected its ability to conclude the trilogy as tightly as I'd have liked, which I'll get into that later in the video. Like we've talked about before, Killzone 3 is another PS3 exclusive, which strands one of the most visually spectacular shooters ever made onto an aging console that fewer people own every year. A game this meticulously crafted to be a visual spectacle deserves a true and proper port to the PC. Regardless of all else, the sheer beauty of this game itself is entitled to a PC port simply by existing. It feels like an affront to art itself not to deliver this game to a place where players can dial it into its absolute peak performance. Until such time as this occurs, PC emulation via your legitimately owned copy will have to suffice, and let me tell you, it's come a long way. What you're seeing on screen is emulated footage recorded on a PC, and I'll readily admit that there's still quite a few hiccups throughout, but the fact that this game runs on PC as smoothly as it does is fantastic. And it absolutely deserves to be tried if you want to attain a copy of the game and try running it on emulation yourself. Although because the game was released so close to the original, you'll notice that there's far less technical upgrades here from the previous game. That's not to say there's none at all though. For instance, Killzone 3 introduced the ability to play the game in full stereoscopic 3D. Remember when that was a thing and everyone was convinced it was the future? On top of that, it's compatible with the PlayStation Move motion controls if you want to grab the needed peripheral lollipops to try it out. The other upgrades I'll talk about later, but rest assured, they are there. Despite the various objective improvements this game boasts over the second game, there's a number of decisions that seem to weigh it down, and some that are downright questionable if they should have been done at all, many of which surround the game's narrative and tone. We are, unfortunately, back to the tone of a Saturday morning cartoon. Killzone 3 decided to take nearly all of the growth, nuance, and maturity from the second game and just throw it all out the window, instead opting for a plot that's twice as bombastic, half as meaningful, and somehow still just as adult. Gone is the moral ambiguity, along with the deeper themes like brotherhood, loss, the pain of war, and the pride of government institutions. Welcome back comically evil supervillain and severely overpowered superhero protagonists. Every character we see carried over from the previous one feels like a totally different person except for one, who, ironically, is the only character who should feel different. I'll get into that later too. This isn't an objectively bad thing since a lot of people may have really liked or maybe even preferred this more lighthearted tone to the darker, grittier, war is hell tone of the second game. Even so, I'll be bringing these changes up a lot as we go through the game and giving my thoughts on why I didn't like them and why I believe they hurt the universe overall. So, I hope you'll enjoy listening along with me and letting me know if you agree or disagree with my conclusions in the comments. With that said, I think it's time we dive straight into the story of Killzone 3, which picks up just minutes after the second game ended, with Rico having murdered Scholar Fazari in a fit of rage and the wrath of a chaotic Helghast fleet on the verge of an all-out war in Retribution. Killzone 3 opens with a beautifully written explanation of the events from the second game, laying out the insane and brutal desolation of the last few hours and the thousands of lives lost, all to the tune of the most emotionally charged track of the whole franchise. This opening sets the stage for how visceral the events of the last game were, and reminds us that we're in the midst of a bloodbath where real lives are being lost at every turn. And I hope that's enough, because this game never takes itself this seriously again. From there, we fade into a scene of a gondola traveling up the side of a mountain where we are joined by multiple Helghast, all of whom seem to perceive us as a friend. Judging by the heads-up display, it doesn't take long to work out that we ourselves are wearing a Helghast uniform. We're allowed through the front gate where we witness a massive Helghast ship passing through the air beside us. It's not clear what we're doing here, but bullets aren't flying, so we try to keep it that way. Based on the way the guards are treating us, we're expected. The next room over shows us a bunch of machines working on something, though it's not clear what. The text told us when we were coming up that this is a manufacturing plant, so I'd say it's safe to assume it's weapons. Now, we're given the chance to do some target practice in a very poorly disguised tutorial level for new players, showing us how to use our primary and secondary weapons. Standard fare stuff, really. When we're done proving our capabilities with our firearms, we're ushered deeper into the facility to the broadcast room. Upon entering said broadcast room, we're introduced via cutscene to the main villain of the game after being informed that we are an executioner here to kill someone. We'll talk more about this bad guy later. For now, things take a surprising twist.
What? You? Yeah, me.
It was a flash forward. We were just shown a glimpse of the future, but now we're back in current time just after Rico put a bullet in Scholar Vizari.
Sev, you okay?
No, Rico. I'm not okay. We had the guy. We had him. And you killed him. You killed Vizari.
The ISA has failed their mission, or rather, Rico has thrown it.
Look, Sev, I just did what had to be done.
And I will damn well make sure he gets court-martialed 6 ways to Sunday for it.
With Vizari dead and the mission to arrest him completely up in smoke, Captain Narville calls for a total ISA evacuation of the planet Helgen. It's past time we got the hell out of here. We see some very extreme tension between Captain Narville and Rico, but there's a few things different about Narville in this game from his debut in Killzone 2. His voice actor is now different, having changed from Mikey O'Connor to James Rimmer, and along with the change in his voice comes a completely different personality. Seriously, the Captain Narville we saw in Killzone 2 is gone, and his appearance here has been totally altered specifically to avoid making Rico have to face a real character arc, but we'll get to that. The mission now is evacuation. We've been on borrowed time here since before Vizari died, and now the whole Helghast fleet is right on top of us, happy to have an excuse to try out their new tech.
What the hell is that?
We need to evac, now! Sev, I need you to carve us a safe corridor! Move, move, move!
We're on the move, with Sev and his boys pushing through enemy territory, and there's a whole lot more of them than there are of us. Not to mention, they've got speed jeeps with people shredders mounted to the front. A chase ensues for a brief period before things come to a sudden head, and it's at this point I feel like the Marvel movieization of Killzone 3 really starts to make itself known.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Our heroes, Sev and Rico, shake it off and start heading in the direction of what they hope are some other ISA soldiers. This is where the game finally gives us control of our character to start causing some damage. Yeah, I know it's hard to believe, but everything up to now has basically been cutscenes. In fact, nearly half of this game's runtime is cutscenes. Also, again, this looks breathtaking. I seriously think this is one of the single best looking sci-fi shooters we've ever seen, and the footage speaks for itself. Now, while Sev and Rico start fighting their way through the dilapidated ruins of the city, there's something I want to quickly address. In Killzone 2, the ISA were under strict orders not to, under any circumstances, harm the Helgen autarch, Scholar Vizari. After having him in the palm of their hands, ready to arrest and basically holding the entire Helgen army hostage to its will with their leader at gunpoint, Rico falls for his manipulation and kills him in a fit of aggression. The morality of this aside, this was not only a total rejection of his orders, but it also damned every ISA soldier on Helgen and totally threw away their mission to satisfy his personal vendetta and made meaningless the death of every soldier that died to see Visari in handcuffs. This was not an assassination mission. The reason I'm bringing all of this up is because this game won't. It not only refuses to acknowledge this dilemma, but repeatedly ignores it. So, whereas Sev in Killzone 2 walked away from Rico clearly feeling furious, downtrodden, and betrayed, those feelings are all gone here. Much like how Narvel is practically a different character, Sev is also quite a bit different from his Killzone 2 iteration. This is due to the change in writers, obviously, but I will be bringing this up again later as well. Other than the fact that the game is a masterclass of detailed level design, something else you might have noticed is the return of the animated melee executions, now called brutal melee attacks. Closing the distance between you and a Helghast enemy will prompt you to hit L1 at the right time and perform either a counter melee attack or a straight up melee execution. Honestly, I love these. I love the visceral melee executions in pretty much any game, and this one has some stellar animation work to see. Okay, I wasn't being 100% accurate earlier when I said Visari's execution isn't brought up again. It is, but in the most dismissive way imaginable.
Listen, Sev, about Visari,
Forget it. I wanted to shoot him too.
but you didn't.
No. But that's because I'm not a jackass.
This is not the same Sevchenko from Killzone 2, and once again, I mean that literally. They replaced the voice work of Dmitry Gorataz from Killzone 2 with Andrew Bowen in Killzone 3, and all I can say is, why? They sound nearly identical, with the biggest difference being that Dimitri's performance sounded more fitting to the character, and Andrew's being far too casual for a war-torn veteran walking off the reality of a failed mission stuck in the capital of the enemy's homeworld. This isn't to negate the good work Andrew did for Killzone 3, but this recast was yet another overcorrection to sway the tone of the series back in the direction of the first game. The combat, however, is as brutal and satisfying as ever. Actually, no, scratch that. It's better. The aiming is smoother, the controls are more responsive, the environment is more detailed. This is the best playing Killzone of the trilogy, bar none. Although a lot of the potential intensity is totally erased by the return of revive mechanics. Just like in Killzone 2, when you're killed, your character is considered incapacitated and must await the arrival of your teammate to zap you with his magic revive gun. This is clearly a co-op mechanic, but it should not have been carried over to the single player. Fights have basically no stakes unless you're either on the hardest difficulty or you go out of your way to run out ahead of your teammate to the point where they can't get to you. Did I mention how sick this melee execution mechanic is, by the way? Seriously, it totally escalated the whole gameplay experience for me. The cover mechanic is back too, as you can see, and you'll actually end up using it more in this game than in the second game it was introduced in. At least I did anyway. Oh, and the stupid motion controller mechanic is back again, requiring you to physically move your controller around to achieve a goal, and it's as silly in this game as it was in the last one. Sev and Rico come across some Helghast collecting a mysterious green liquid and express ignorance as to what it is, which leads us to believe that it's not the Petricite element we found in the last game. Oh, and then we get a turret section. No worries, much like in Halo 3, we can just rip the minigun off its stand and use it as a weapon, which is awesome.
Time to go mobile.
Everybody!
Control's being breached!
This city we're fighting through is called Pyrrhus, and I'm a little unclear both on how we're able to even breathe here and how there's anything left given that this is the city that we saw get nuked in the last game. But it does both look and feel incredible to play through. The devastation of the previous massive explosion can be seen in every direction, and the level of detail on display here, once again, puts other shooters to shame. The crippled ruins of this city make for such a fun backdrop to shoot our way through, and it feels like such a genuine display of the utter genocide that took place here just a few hours prior. After pushing through the desolation, however, we're able to relink with the ISA convoy, where Captain Narvel gives Sev and Rico new orders to mount up and provide covering fire for the rest of the vehicles that are still functioning. This is where the game cuts to something that we haven't seen before: the Helgen Senate. Here, we see the currently available senators debating and deliberating not only what to do following the death of Scholar Visari, but also how to handle the remaining ISA forces. This is where we're introduced to something that completely caught me off guard with this title: the existence of a private sector. Our new primary villain, along with a sub-villain, are introduced here and shown to be having an argument as one accuses the other of incompetence. This new primary villain's name is Joran Stahl, and he is the CEO of a private company called Stahl Arms. For simplicity, just think of him as if he were the CEO of, I don't know, Lockheed Martin, or General Dynamics, or Boeing, or Raytheon. Anyway, his entire business is subsidized by the Helgen government, from which he is paid exorbitant amounts of money to manufacture weapons of war for the sole purpose of causing immense devastation and destruction. However, it looks like that money just isn't enough.
Does it hurt, knowing that no matter what you do, you'll never emerge from Visari's shadow? Is that why you let him die?
Helghast will never bargain with the ISA! There will be no quarter!
Yeah, Stahl is demonstrating a very clear lack of faith in the current administration, and this isn't at all circumstantial. More on that later. Let's get back to our heroes who are currently fighting for their lives to get off this hell world. We re-inhabit the perspective of Sergeant Sevchenko, who has been put behind the gun of an ISA Lancer, which is a 6-wheeled armored troop carrier tank for those who don't know. This is actually a very important mission because it marks our first vehicle mission in Killzone 3, and believe it or not, there's actually several of them across this game's runtime. Some of them are cool, others are questionable, but nearly all of them are on rails, not allowing us to control the vehicle itself, meaning what you're seeing on screen is actually a little more than a glorified turret section. Although, if you're going to have a turret section, this is a damn fine way to go about it. We see entire buildings collapse into dust, multitudes of enemy frigates slowly hovering above our heads, and are given a horde of enemy Helghast to butcher into red mist with our massive 50 caliber machine gun. It isn't too long in this carrier before we reach a point where we need to abandon our vehicles and assist some fellow ISA soldiers. There's an enemy arc cannon just up ahead, and our orders from Narville are to take it out. Only problem is that there's a horde of Helghast troops pinning us down to prevent that from happening. So our job now is to head into this old building, fight our way through to higher ground, and do something about the snipers currently holding sights on our comrades' positions. I like this section a lot, actually. It seems to harken back to the vibe of the last game, with us bashing through doors and fighting through these war-torn buildings. Oh, and this mechanic of bashing down doors basically stops mattering after this mission. Take it in while you can. Oh boy, a sniper rifle. We're back to a certified sniper section, which means... Alright, the situation is escalating. These snipers need to go before they make mincemeat of our boys. This scene is kind of an anomaly because we're given specific objective markers for enemies to take out from a distance, and this doesn't really ever happen again. This kind of hyper-intense war-torn combat is where Killzone shines the brightest, which makes it so weird that it's so rare for the series to genuinely tread here. Once we take out the last sniper,
Nice shot.
we're able to make our way down and regroup with Rico and the others. The situation turns out not to be so simple, however, when an ISA soldier radios out for help declaring that she's been pinned down. Her name is Jammer, or I guess that's probably her call sign, but either way, Rico answers and lets her know that he's on the way before Captain Narville interrupts to order him to stand down and asks her to hang tight as he sends a troop carrier to retrieve her. The whole situation is put into perspective, though, when everyone is made aware of just what kind of situation they're in right now.
Dispersive armor is holding.
Captain Narville, we can't hold our position much longer.
If you're gonna get here, do it fast.
We're gonna need new transport. Come on.
Get your evac posts!
Well, the situation continues to escalate, and our odds of escape continue to plummet. But no worries, Sev and Rico find a couple of mechs just laying around that we get to take control of. This control's very much the same as the mech segment from Killzone 2, but with a few more interesting set pieces to gawk at during your time in the aforementioned Titan, such as the giant metal gear in the distance firing off shots at our allied ships to further incentivize us that whoever's left on this planet is not worth sticking around for. I like this section too, going head to head with multiple Helghast tanks and carving through dozens of Helghast soldiers, all while stomping through the ruins of a desolate city while an enormous mega tank blows holes in the shields of your friendly ships just adds a serious level of gravity to what's happening. Our power fantasy doesn't last long, however, as the giant tank immobilizes our tanks, forcing us back out on foot. That girl we saw trying to contact us for assistance earlier reaches back out on comms again, asking for help since her previous backup never arrived, and Rico tells Narville to take a hike.
I didn't come here to run from the Helghast. I don't leave people behind. Hold on, Jammer. I'm coming.
Rico! I get it, but we don't have time.
I gotta do this, man. I'll meet you at the extraction point.
Hell no, I'm with you.
This was on me, buddy. Besides, you gotta tell Narvel to wait, okay?
Well, we're split up from Rico, and now it's just us and a handful of fellow ISA soldiers. The evacuation is in full effect, and we are out of time. Our ships are prepping for launch, and if we're not on them, then we may as well start looking at Helgen real estate, because we ain't leaving. The cool thing about this scene is the intensity of the trench warfare. This almost harkens back to the original intro of Killzone 1, with how it's trying to emulate the filth and brutality of what fighting through trenches looks like. This is one of those scenes that really just made me say out loud that, man, they don't make them like they used to. It doesn't matter though, we're still miles away when Sev stops to see the ISA ships initiate their launch to flee the planet's atmosphere. And even then, it might not be soon enough. Sev manages to make it back to Narville, but Rico is still missing, and it doesn't look like he's going to make it.
Where the hell is Rico?
I don't know. No, wait, what about Rico?
I'm sorry, Sev.
Hey! Hey! There's Rico!
Hey! Get to cover! Now!
Nearly there.
This is Captain Narville contacting all surviving personnel. Retreat to emergency fallback locations. I repeat, emergency protocol 5 Niner Echo is in effect. God help us.
Where are the ISA? Why haven't you found them yet?
They've proven to be more tenacious than expected.
Which was my exact point 6 months ago. You should have listened to me, but no. You had to do it your way. You had to pound them until they surrendered.
The ISA will be dealt with in due time.
Yes, well, that's exactly what you said. You said hours, not months. The people of Helgen want results, not empty promises from you all along.
So, there's some Star Wars prequel level political discourse happening here. Since our big bad dictator Scholar Vizari was killed at the end of the second game, the writers have introduced the Helgen Senate and its various members. That angry guy with the shaved head and mustache is Admiral Orlok of the Helgen Army, and the skinny guy he's arguing with that looks like Christoph Waltz from Inglourious Bastards is named Johann Stahl, and he's actually voiced by Malcolm McDowell, who brings a really great performance to the character. Surprisingly, that one guy who looks like someone ordered Adolf from Wish is inconsequential. I guess they figured making him the next big bad would have been too on the nose. Instead, our new primary villain is the aforementioned Johann Stahl, an industrialist who owns the manufacturing company responsible for the creation of the Helghast army and all of its resources. Stahl voices his discontent for Admiral Orlok's handling of the Helgen military in light of Visari's demise, and a member of the council motions for a vote of no confidence in his capabilities, and for power to be transferred in full to Johann Stahl. The motion is denied as the majority of the council does not vote in favor of it, and Stahl takes it very poorly. Seems there's some trouble in paradise with the Helgen Senate, as the power vacuum left by Visari remains unfilled. But how are things with our ISA friends stranded here on Helgen? Turns out they've built a small encampment here in the planet's wilderness and are just holed up trying to survive off of whatever they can find, including cooking and eating the local wildlife. Now they're really starting to understand why the Helghast are so angry all of the time after being exiled here for centuries. It's been quite a while since the Vectan fleet fled Helgen, and even Sev is clearly looking rough after a few months of not shaving or cutting his hair. Meanwhile, literally every other character looks completely the same. This is a minor annoyance to me, but if you're going to make one character look unkempt to display their lack of hygienic resources, then not doing it for everyone completely undermines the whole thing. Giving Narville and the other characters unkempt hair and out-of-control beards would have done wonders to cement the idea that they are all surviving off of little to nothing and reinforce the suspension of disbelief. But instead, they only do Sev Rico, and it feels like a half measure. Like, this character clearly just shaved his head yesterday, and I can tell you that as someone who shaves his head very often. Hell, even Narville looks like he just got a buzz cut within the last month. If they've got the equipment to do this, then making Sev Rico look so unkempt just implies that they've given up on maintaining their regiment in spite of everyone else around them having not done so, which isn't a good look for them as soldiers. It's such a minor gripe, I know, but also, how hard would it have been to just make the other characters look more unkempt as if they had no access to shaving equipment? Either way, with Rico still MIA and everyone here stranded in the Helgen wasteland with no way home, our best bet is a radio uplink currently being jammed by Helghast forces. So Narville orders Sev and another of the stranded ISA soldiers to suit up and find that radio uplink to try and open up communications with Vecta and hopefully figure out if the Earth fleet is coming or not and what the hell our next move is. And this is actually another visually spectacular level. We've been hearing about the hyper dangerous and hostile nature of the planet Helgen since the first game, but until now, all we've really seen are some old cities and a desert wasteland. Well, now we finally see the horror show that is the Helgen Wilds, and it's some of the most unique and interesting alien world design I've ever seen. Everything looks dangerous, like it could potentially lacerate you if you grazed it, and there's giant spiders crawling around everywhere that will attack you. No time for admiring the fauna though. Just up ahead, Sev finds one of our missing ISA soldiers being hunted by some kind of Special Forces Helghast unit.
No, look, there's too many. Now we know what happened to the recon team.
That was a capture trooper. They are not part of the General Helgen army and are instead a Special Forces paramilitary unit used only by Stahl Arms Manufacturing, which marks an interesting divide between the enemy entities that will come up again later. For now, we get a stealth section. I'll be honest, Killzone is not a series I'd have ever thought would be conducive to fun stealth gameplay, but I mean, it works pretty well here. I've seen games with far worse stealth gameplay than this. It's simple but effective. We have to rely on our silenced SMG pulling off fast headshots from a distance when we can, and dispatching the rest with close quarters knife takedowns when necessary. There are times when it almost starts to feel like a horror game due just to how outmatched and in danger we are.
Troopers, batten feet up
Wait here.
for your lines.
Alright, come on, let's go.
Hiding in grass to crawl under the cover of the harsh environment, dispatching anyone happening to stand with their back to us, firing off shots into these burster plants that send out sharp spikes in every direction, killing whoever is too near them. By staying quiet, we are able to locate the radio uplink we came for, and let's just say the situation isn't favorable. Dozens of Helghast soldiers surrounding the objective, and a couple of ATACs hovering around, shifting the odds further against us. Despite Sev warning Captain Narville that these soldiers aren't here to guard anything, and that this is an execution task force hunting the ISA encampment, which they're very close to at the moment, Narville reiterates the importance of Sev's acquisition of that radio uplink. So Sev sends his comrade back to the camp to convince Narville to begin packing up and resolves to finish this mission on our own. Stealth is even more imperative now than it was before since our backup just turned back. We cannot afford to be spotted. Killzone 3 manages to maintain a surprisingly satisfying stealth gameplay loop here as we stay in the shadows and take full advantage of the lethal Helgen flora available to us. We only get like one mission in this Helgen hellscape environment, but man, they did a good job making it seem like you've been stranded in a horror flick. Everything is so crab-like and arachnid in nature. I would absolutely not want to live somewhere like this. Not to mention the Decepticons they've got working for them. I mean, just listen to the sound design. I'm starting to see the Horizon Zero Dawn design now. It's cool to see this suppressed SMG make a comeback since the last time we really saw it was the first game as a primary for Luger's character, only this time it actually serves a purpose. I do think that it's important to remember, however, that Killzone is not a stealth game series, and as such, we can't keep up this charade for very much longer. Sev manages to make his way right up to the location of the radio uplink where we see one of our fellow soldiers get literally obliterated by a gun firing that new green element we saw earlier in the game. That green energy is the same Petricite from the last game, only it's been irradiated, which apparently changes what exactly it does and has been harvested into something even more dangerous than it was before. After quietly clearing out this area of hostiles, Sev finally manages to get his hands on the radio uplink so we can reroute transmission capabilities back to Captain Narville to try and communicate with the Earth fleet. Things only get more complicated from there though.
General, thank God. Sir, the Higgs are knocking at our door. Can the fleet still find us if we have to move?
Captain, listen to me. As of last night, the Vectan colonial government has capitulated. All hostilities will cease immediately.
What are you talking about?
War's over, Captain. You and your men will have to surrender to the Helghast forces so we can negotiate your release as prisoners of war.
Forgive me, General, but are you out of your mind? This is the Helghast we're talking about. You have no idea what they do to their prisoners.
Those are your orders, Captain. Stand down and surrender.
God damn it!
Captain, they picked up your signal. You need to stop this transmission right now and get... Sir, your dropships are heading towards you. Get the hell out of there! Captain, you can't surrender! Tell me you're not gonna surrender!
Great. As if things weren't bad enough already, now we've got news that the Vectan government and the ISA have waved the white flag and surrendered to the Helghast fleet. Oh, and part of said Helghast fleet is currently storming our position in a bloodlust-fueled fury. Call me crazy, but I'm not convinced surrender is even an option here. And let me tell you, you can really feel the difference when you've got no AI backup. It doesn't happen often in this game, but the few times when you're legit on your own are where the stakes feel the highest and the intensity feels the realest. We're short on time though, since the Helghast are most assuredly assaulting our home base right now, and we need to rush back the way we came to offer up some backup to our boys. We do eventually come across a few stragglers from our camp to help us fight back some of the Helghast and fight alongside us to find Narville and the others. Upon getting back to the base, however, we find the place totally under assault from Higg forces. Our options are limited here. The best we can do is run support and kill as many of these attackers as possible while our forces evacuate and retreat further into the wilderness. And it doesn't help things that they called in some more Decepticons here to pour rockets across the area. Not even exaggerating when I say this is legitimately one of the best and more hectic firefights of the whole game. This feels like a last stand even though we're only roughly halfway through the game at this point, although even our best isn't enough. With most of our comrades dead and our ammunition basically gone, Sev and Captain Narville are arrested and taken into custody while the rest of our brothers in arms are executed on their knees. It's actually really brutal. This game isn't pulling its violent punches. Sev is now riding in a Helghast dropship with his hands bound and a vicious execution likely awaiting him at the end of this ship ride. Although old Sev is making light of it all the same.
Your king went down like a pussy. Whoa, soldier. Relax, man.
You touch him and Stahl's gonna kill us both.
Oh, that sounds bad.
You shut your mouth.
All I was saying was that Visari died crying like a little bitch, and if you can't handle that...
This was an era where protagonists started suffering from, well, for lack of a better term, what I like to call Nathan Drake syndrome. I'll elaborate on that in a second, but look, Rico is here to save us. Although we still get this insane first-person cutscene, and it's an admittedly great set piece. Sev ends up demanding to Rico that they go in hot and retrieve Captain Narville, an idea Rico angrily disagrees with, but following some persistence from Sev, he relents and Rico's men agree to go in after Narville and get him out of there. What ensues is a climactic sequence where we ride through these rigs and shred them with our minigun, which, I mean, I'm not complaining about using a minigun. Sev demanding that they rescue Narville and saying that they are absolutely not leaving him behind would make sense following Sev's traumatic loss of his friend Garza in the last game, if that ever got brought up. Unfortunately, Garza's death isn't ever mentioned, not even once. Instead, Rico and Sev are best friends despite Rico's short temper and lack of impulse control being the reason Garza is dead in the first place. This is understandable as well, because in this kind of insane situation, I can empathize with him being best friends with Rico given how few friends they have left right now. But it feels like this is the symptom of something deeper than that. The ship we're on gets shot down as we're stranded on this iceberg where we are reunited with Rico to once again go in weapons hot and fight our way through this rig to the other side. This is actually a great example of Killzone's corridor shooting where it feels great. Oh yeah, back to what I was saying before about Sev's character. In Killzone 2, I pointed out how he felt a little bit bland. Like, he didn't have much to say for a big portion of the game, and didn't really come into his own until after he lost his friend Garza. The two of them had a recognizable friendship of an introvert and an extrovert. Sev didn't need to talk often because he was always hanging out with Garza, who talked enough for both of them. Growing Sev from this dynamic had a lot of potential for what such a character arc might look like, but we don't see that. Instead, we get basically a different character who's making snappy comebacks and one-liners at every turn and making light of intense situations to show how badass he is. Nowadays, I've seen people calling this something like Marvel writing, but this isn't quite that because it's not self-aware or making fun of its own concepts, which is why I called it Nathan Drake syndrome earlier. Because Drake was a very popular protagonist and Sony clearly liked how beloved the character was, I'm suspicious that the lack of units sold for Killzone 2, despite its severely positive critical reception, caused Sony to step in and demand some changes. I can't prove that, but I can tell you that this isn't the same character from Killzone 2. He doesn't sound like him due to the new voice actor, he doesn't act like him, and he doesn't even seem to carry the same baggage. Hell, he doesn't even look like him after the second mission. But you know who he does kinda look like with this new hairstyle though? Nathan Drake. How's he even keeping his hair up like that? Would they bring along a bunch of hair gel for the troops or something? This should realistically look more like this. I think I've said enough on that point though, because Killzone 3 has a very exciting new sequence to show us. We're getting a vehicle section. Kind of. Sev straps into one of the flight packs we've been seeing the Helghast use up to this point, and then the game gives us full control to use it, and yeah, it's pretty damn cool. Most of the vehicle sections of this game are just on-rail shooter segments, but here we can actually control the jetpack to ascend into the air and boost around in combat. It controls surprisingly well, and having an LMG attached to a hydraulic arm feels as fun to use as it sounds. We can even hear the hydraulics in the arm working sometimes. So we fight our way to the generator and blow the power to the whole rig with a D-charge. That was just the appetizer though. The big boy is that main rig across the way, which means we get to keep playing with our new toy to fly across a series of icebergs. Now, obviously this is a linear sequence, but if you just embrace it as an interactive action movie, then it's just such a fun time to play. I ended up being very surprised by how long they let us keep using this thing too. A lot of games will introduce a mechanic like this and just let you play with it for a few minutes, but we can use this thing for a huge chunk of this mission. I found playing through a version of this game that lets me basically fly around and dash through the air to be very compelling. And because it's set in an environment that requires us to fly over these chaotic waters, it feels like the level design is complementing the gameplay. Can't get distracted though, we're here to plant a series of D-charges on the support beams of this rig and blow it to pieces. Which, after doing so, the game actually gives us a real timer on the screen to show us how long we have before the charges go off and we follow this thing to the bottom of the ocean. Although the timer is more than generous enough to let us make it out with plenty of time to spare. What follows is quite possibly one of the most over-the-top Uncharted-esque scenes of the entire Killzone franchise.
It's worked! Kill this thing!
Joining back up with Sev, we get no respite as we touch down to siege the area where we believe Narville has been taken. We also watch half of Rico's squad get totally slaughtered by Helghast machine turrets. Seriously, we see so many ISA soldiers die, and with how few we're led to believe are left on the planet to begin with, I don't know where they keep coming from at this point. But either way, we have to fight our way up to that mortar turret and use it to take out those machine gun nests before there's no ISA soldiers left on this planet. After reaching the mortar, we are able to blow those machine gun nests out of existence, shoot down a few Helghast dropships, and then, even better, rip the mortar off its hinges and just bring the whole thing with us. Oh, and it's a fun one. We're carrying around a mobile anti-artillery weapon that we can literally use to blow up tanks right in front of us. As far as power fantasies go, Killzone 3 has something figured out here. Also, is it just me, or does this game from 2011, released over a decade ago, look better than most games released now? It's not all in the fidelity either. There's tons of new games that are higher resolution with much cleaner looking fidelity than this. No, it's the atmosphere and attention to detail. The smoke, the snow particles, the fiery remains of destroyed vehicles, and, I'm not afraid to say it, the lens flares. They're subtle and make the game feel even more cinematic. I like them. Not to mention the massive mountaintops in the distance. I just think this is one of the best looking games we've ever seen get released. Finally making it through the barricade, Rico gets in touch with his raider group and tells them to disband and go find the rest of Narville's men, sending Jammer, his second in command, to take over in his absence while he and Seb take the remaining units here to assault the Helghast station up ahead. I will say that there's something uniquely satisfying about fighting your way up a steep hill towards an enemy fortress like this, and don't worry, we can even the odds with the portable mortar launcher that we brought along, and there's frequent ammo stashes around here to keep it fueled up for use. Sometimes though, we have to rely on old-fashioned building-to-building firefighting, like now. We're still severely outnumbered here though, and a single building is one thing, but Narville has been taken to the Stahl Arms manufacturing facility at the top of the mountain, and to call getting through that alive impossible would be underselling its non-feasibility. Luckily, we might just have a way to get through to Narville without even firing a shot.
Area secured, Vigilant. All enemies eliminated.
Copy that. Return to base Argus and report for reassignment.
Roger that last transmission.
What are you doing?
Getting us inside.
And we're back to the beginning. This is where the flash forward we saw at the start of the game took place, and so now we know how it is Seb and Rico ended up dressed like Helghast soldiers walking through one of the manufacturing plants. This is actually a really cool scene. We see Seb and Rico sharing a gondola with other Helghast as they look at each other, but not knowing if they're going to be found out or not. The situation is very tense, and things become even more intense when we finally get to the facility itself. We've already seen a lot of this before. Being told we've been assigned to the factory, seeing some other ISA soldiers being pushed around, the whole bit. Unlike the flash forward from earlier, we don't go to the firing range for target practice. This time we have to create a diversion that will lure the guards away from the room where they're keeping Captain Narville. This is done by turning a wheel with this stupid motion control gimmick to release a bunch of steam, which forces a bunch of Helghast to rush over and investigate. During this commotion, we're able to slip past the guards unnoticed. Well, mostly unnoticed anyway. Upon reaching the prison area, we are luckily mistaken for the executioners, which means they hand us a very big gun and walk us straight to Captain Narville's location. Come to find, we're in a very good place right now, with Narville right there and our enemy Stahl standing right beside him. Although Stahl decides to make it very clear that he has no intention of allowing the Helghast to peacefully accept the ISA surrender like the current administration wants. He begins broadcasting himself across the entire planet, announcing his plans to usurp the current Senate leadership by rallying the people behind him, and then launch a campaign against both Vecta and the Earth to take revenge and claim dominance over the other colonized planets. With his first gesture being the live broadcasted execution of Narville, presented to the public as one of Visari's killers. Of course, we can't let that happen.
Of his killers!
What?
You?
Yeah, me.
This is an outrage!
Rico! You're alive!
No thanks to you.
What?
Go help Seth.
Alright, well, getting in was easy, but getting out's looking a bit more complicated. It's a good thing they literally handed us this experimental irradiated petricite cannon that causes people to explode into a mist of pink fun. And I mean, like, just look. Need I say more? I will anyway. This thing is awesome and continues the series' tradition of giving us insanely overpowered weapons to play with roughly halfway through the game, although this one might be the best yet. Coming to a brief moment of rest where the Helghast don't know where we are, Sev tells the captain that according to Stahl's speech, it did not sound like they were planning to honor the ISA surrender, and asks for a few minutes to find their main computer and verify the Helghast's plans. Rico is very upset to hear that the ISA has surrendered, and also that he's only just now finding out.
Sorry, man, it slipped my mind.
And finding out while we're coffin deep in enemy territory probably wasn't the most opportune time he could have learned this information. In the meantime, we have to fight our way out of this mess, and fast, which means now is a great time to talk about how Killzone 3's gunplay feels. Well, to be blunt, it feels way better than 2 in pretty much every way. Whereas a lot of Killzone 2's combat felt floaty and sometimes even unresponsive, Killzone 3 feels tight and a lot more like what we would expect of a shooter sporting this kind of budget. Snapping to cover feels very natural and satisfying, and while sliding is a staple of any competent shooter now, it wasn't quite as common back in 2011, only appearing in a few different shooters around that time. It just feels great to play, and has easily the best gunplay of the trilogy. After fighting through an abundance of Helghast soldiers, we're finally able to access the main computer system we came for, where we can try to get some answers about Stahl's plans. What Sev and Rico find, however, isn't very pretty.
That's Earth.
Jesus Christ!
We gotta tell Narville. Come on.
Okay, so it looks like Stahl isn't planning an invasion, he's planning a genocide against the entirety of Earth's population utilizing this new irradiated petricite element he's discovered. Staying alive isn't the goal anymore. It's a prerequisite for our new objective of figuring out a way to either warn Earth or stop this from happening. If Stahl's fleet makes it there, then more than half of humanity will be wiped out in a matter of minutes. Which means Sev, Rico, Narville, and our little band of renegades here are the only thing standing between Stahl and the total annihilation of an entire planet. Narville contacts us over the radio to inform us that he's freed the ISA prisoners being held here, probably due to us taking all of the aggro, and to meet them outside of the facility to find a way off this mountain. So, after relinking with him and the rest of our boys, we head back outside where we find something I was all too happy to see. One of the Helghast jetpack vehicles just sitting there waiting for me to use it, which of course I did. Normally games would just include a mechanic like this once and then they're done, but at least the developers had the good sense to give us another arena where we can play with this jetpack and even fight off another ATAC, although far easier than when we had to do it in the second game. With the extraction zone secured, now it's just a matter of finding transport and getting the hell out of here. We then cut to Stahl receiving a video call from the Helghan Senate, informing him that his failure was humiliating to watch, and that Admiral Orlok has been named the new autarch of the planet Helghan. Orlok then orders Stahl to hand his arms, soldiers, facility, and all other resources over to him immediately, and Stahl clearly does not take this very well at all.
No! No! No!
After this, Sev and Narville have a brief talk about what they can do to stop this invasion and come to the conclusion that the capital ship above them is their ticket to warn Earth if they can just find a way to commandeer it. Rico's squad shows back up to offer their support while Sev and Rico mount up on one of those tanks with the massive people grinders on the front I talked about way earlier. And this whole sequence is... I can't see it. I feel like this is an emulator issue or something, but the post-processing effects are so heavy that I actually cannot see in front of me. Although I can tell you that you're not missing much. As cool as this sequence is in theory, it's really just a straight path where we blow up a few enemy vehicles and avoid some rocks. The whole thing takes less than 5 minutes to complete and isn't even all that fun in the process. In fact, all of the major vehicle sections in this game are either super linear to the point of barely being fun, or just literally on rails where you have no real control. More so the latter than the former. I like the idea of including vehicle sections in these games, but why are they all either on rails or so damn linear? Killzone 2 introduced us to a level where we could kind of control a tank on our own, driving it around and firing weapons, although it didn't give us the kind of arena we'd need to really have fun with it. I half expected the idea to be fully realized in this game with a level that lets us control our own vehicle while we drove around and did things, but it doesn't happen. I don't count the mech either, although that was a great sequence. I don't want to make it out like this scene isn't cool. It is. I mean, it's another visual spectacle, but it's really little more than an interactive set piece that lasts all of 3 minutes before it ends, and we're back to being on foot again. Which, I mean, to be fair, is where the Killzone series really shines.
That's a warp launch.
A forward scout ship. That means the rest of the fleet launches within the hour. Sev, the invasion started.
Captain.
We saw it, Sergeant.
Let's go, people! Sev, if we're gonna get the warning out, we gotta get to the spaceport as fast as we can.
We gotta move.
Again, wow, I'm just continuously impressed by how this game manages to make a junkyard of garbage look so damn spectacular and visually enticing. Looks like the Helghast don't know we're here yet, probably still looking for us near the mountains or something. As for this scrapyard, it's weird that it's so close to the space elevator we need to take us up to the space station above. It makes me wonder, did they build this elevator next to a scrapyard, or did the scrapyard come as a result of working on said elevator? Or, like, what happened here? Either way, Narville and the rest of Rico's unit have all stumbled right into an irradiated petricite field defense mechanism. If they move too much, then they're going to end up having a very bad time, which one guy can't handle the need for stillness and ends up getting both himself and half of his own teammates killed.
Tim, what's going on?
Sir, we just lost 5 guys.
We just lost 5 guys? One of Narville's guys named Hooper starts making his way to the fence's control panel to try and hack it to take it offline, but Sev and Rico aren't satisfied with how long that might take and opt instead to pursue an alternative solution.
We need something faster than this.
That mobile factory is our ticket to taking that petricite grid offline, but now the Helghast know where we are. They've caught up to our position and we're going to have to fight through them to meet up with Jammer, which means it's a good thing they left us a bolt gun lying around. You guys remember me saying how much I loved this thing when I talked about the second game, and it is once again an absolute blast to use. You may be wondering who this Jammer character we've seen wearing a hood and working with Rico is, but I'm just letting you know that you're not missing much context. She was introduced in this game and plays a supporting role as one of Rico's raiders. This is the only game she ever appears in, and although implied, it's never confirmed if she and Rico are attracted to one another. Back to the scrapyard, we've now made too much noise and half the Helghan army is descending down on our location. Even the gate we need to get through has been blocked, and to make things worse, there's snipers everywhere. Yeah, see? First thing we gotta do is take out that sniper and start thinning the number of these soldiers out, which makes me damn glad I brought a bolt gun. This then becomes kind of like a tower defense section, with us holding down this position for a time while a few waves of enemies pour in and try to overtake us. There's not too many of these in the game, so I didn't really have much of a problem with this. Once we manage to fight them back a bit, then Rico gets the crane online to open us up an entrance out of here. There's a subtlety to the level design here that repeats something I've seen before in the game, and I even pointed it out earlier. But a lot of the paths in Killzone 3 are fought with slight ascension as enemies fight down towards you. This scene is a great example of it, but there's other instances too. It's literally having the player fight an uphill battle. I don't know if this was intentional or not, but I suspect it was, given that it happens more than once, where the player is funneled into a narrow path to fight uphill as Helghast descend down towards you. Like I said before, it's subtle, and if it was intentional, then it's downright brilliant. It's at this point after reaching the end of this path, however, that the game just completely jumps the shark. Sev and Rico fall down a hill into the path of the mobile factory we came here to stop, and Jammer gets here right in the nick of time to rescue them. After that, though, the game pretty much just turns into a set piece from a Fast and Furious movie.
Everybody okay?
Jammer, get behind it.
Got it.
Rico, you with me on this? Yeah. Raiders. Meet me up top.
Alright, well, we're on board the giant moving factory, and our best advantage is probably the element of surprise. I actually really like this whole sequence, like how we shoot down this jet trooper and he falls down into the giant spinning grinder blades. Just brutal, dude. I also really like how the combat feels so tight-knit like a corridor shooter here. It's not a long sequence, but I really feel like the shooting in this particular section is the best of the whole game. There's some interesting parts after this, but this was the intensity highlight for me. I mean, you guys already know how much I love pulling miniguns off their stand, walking around an area with them, and doing to my opposition what paper shredders do to classified documents. When we finally clear this thing of Helghast soldiers, Sev and Rico commandeer the driver's seat and redirect this behemoth of a vehicle towards the control tower of the Petrosite defense grid currently trapping Narville and the rest of our guys. With very few seconds to spare, Jammer flies up to extract us out of here.
Come on! You guys ever think of leaving before the explosions start?
Oh, you can do that?
You see what I meant about the Nathan Drake thing? After that, Rico orders his raiders to regroup and scout ahead to get a lay of the land, when Narville calls in over the radio to contradict Rico by telling his squad to hold their position. This frustrates Rico, and he questions the order over the radio, which makes Narville very angry as he secures a separate line to rebuke Rico and order him to never question a superior officer's order on an open comm again. The two characters very much do not get along. Sev and Rico do decide to follow orders, however, and touch down near Narville's position where they're rallying together to prep an assault on the space elevator. The explosion of that mobile factory may have saved Narville and our boys from being imploded, but it also drew the attention of the Helghast forces looking for us, which means that they are all starting to flood into our location, and hell's coming with them.
All troops, proceed to the elevator! Move! Do not engage! I repeat, do not engage!
We saw this thing near the start of the game, and now it's back again. We might not have a choice but to take it out this time, though. As for the design itself, yeah, of course, it does feel a bit like the Scarab idea from Halo 2, but that doesn't mean this isn't done very well in its own right. I mean, the sound design alone is better than most Hollywood blockbusters. Like, seriously, this thing is next level. Imagine trying to fight a war and someone drops one of these things in the middle of your city. Like, this almost feels like a Warhammer game. Meanwhile, Rico has wasted no time regrouping with his raiders, and he makes the call to go in on the offensive, but suddenly second guesses himself, telling his raiders to hold, and then, in what almost seems like a moment of character growth, calls in to ask Captain Narville what his orders are.
God help us. This is Captain Narville. All units, pull back immediately. I repeat.
All units, disengage and fall back to defensive position.
Damn it, Narville! Take us down, now!
Sir, there's no time. Forget about trying to get us home. We gotta find a way to stop the fleet from launching.
This is not the time to question orders, Sergeant.
What the fuck are you doing? We're out of time here and you want to fall back and regroup? So we can try again later when the Helghast invasion is over?
My priority is the lives of my men. Now get back in position!
What? Order the attack, you fucking coward!
Hey, both of you just back off! There are more important things than our men. We cannot let the Helghast get to Earth with whatever Stahl has been building in those labs!
If we go out there, we can kiss our asses goodbye. We need to think. There has to be another way.
Fine. Run. I'm gonna outflank you.
On foot? That's even worse than his idea.
You know what? You can either help me or you can get the hell out of my way.
Sevchenko, stand down. This gung-ho crap is gonna get us all killed.
No. This is what's gonna get us all killed.
You two are with me.
I'm holding you responsible for that.
You do that, but you know he's right. Now help us do our jobs.
Armored Division, this is Captain Narville. We need to draw its fire. Hit that Mauler with everything you've got. Everything, you hear?
All right, Raiders, this is Raider Command. We're going in hard.
So, I actually have a lot of problems with that interaction, narratively speaking. That scene we just saw was the resolution to our characters' arcs, and it left some things to be desired. I'll talk more on that later. For now, let's talk about the skyscraper-sized mechanical spider creature walking around above our heads that looks suspiciously like that thing from the end of Wild Wild West. Did somebody let John Peters into the writing room for this or something? Did he produce this game? What are we doing here? This is a little bit like a boss battle almost. It even kind of has phases and patterns to learn. We have to use this rocket launcher to shoot the cooling vents that open every time the thing fires, and then dodge into cover when it starts firing back. I will say that Guerrilla was really showing off their engine here. I mean, just look at how the building we're in falls apart in pieces as it's being shot. This is Battlefield 3 level destructible environment. Also, the scale of this is insane. Like, being on the ground in first person like this while fighting a monster of this magnitude is genuinely epic. I can't think of many games that offer an experience like this. Eventually, after punching a few rockets through the machine's cooling vents, we actually do manage to stagger the thing. With the mechanical beast on the ground, Sev calls into Narville for a status report, but quickly finds out the hard way that the massive bipedal tank is still very much functional, and whoever's piloting it is not happy. It unleashes a massive blast, taking Jammer and Rico out of the sky, and then another one seemingly crushing Narville and Jammer. Sev tries to contact them via radio, only to realize they aren't answering. Assuming they're dead, Sev then angrily embarks towards the space elevator in hopes of finishing their mission. Also, you really gotta hand it to Stahl and his factory, because when it comes to weapons of immense destruction, they really figured something out, because this thing just won't go down. We manage to fight our way to the space elevator platform and start to head up. So far, so good. If Sev can just stay focused, then maybe we can really pull this off, assuming something doesn't go very wrong. Yeah, like that.
Where do you guys keep coming from?
Everyone okay?
Yeah!
Sev?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Damn it! It's blocking the elevator!
Rico, go! I'll follow your lead.
Sev, you're with me. All groups on my vector. Let's finish this.
And that was Narville's character arc coming to fruition. We're back in another vehicle section, and just like most of the other ones, it's totally on rails. I don't hate this or anything. I think rail shooters are fun, but they do rob the player of a lot of potential autonomy. If you're going to have rail segments though, it certainly helps to make them look this damn good. Seriously, look at this, it's breathtaking. Before we blow it up, let's talk a little bit about this mechanical monster that's been terrorizing us the whole game. It's called the Mauler, which stands for Mounted Artillery Walker / Long Range. Although it would be easy to assume that this is the same Mauler we saw near the start of the game, it's actually not. This is a different one. The Helghast have actually had several in production and started getting them online after Vecta began its invasion at the start of Killzone 2. This thing is equipped with dozens of autocannons and Wasp rocket launchers, dozens more mortar launchers, and a few hundred machine guns scattered across its legs. Oh, and a massive arc cannon that could punch a hole through a capital ship. Realistically, if one of these was dropped into a city, it's game over. You lose. But since this is a video game and we're the heroes, it's going down hard. With the Mauler immobilized, we land and regroup with our men to see there's only 60 ISA soldiers left alive on the whole planet, and they're all standing right here. No ships, no backup. Only that one space elevator that'll take us right into the heart of the Helghast space station. Narville expresses doubt at their chances, and Rico tries to express why doing this matters, and that if they're all going to die anyway, they should at least die for a reason. Everyone's not convinced, as they all resign to admit defeat. Sevchenko doesn't accept it, and proceeds to give the most mid-hero speech I've ever heard in a game with this kind of budget.
Do you realize the odds against us still being here? Right here. Right now? None of us should be alive. And that means something. Now listen up! We've all seen what the Helghast do to their prisoners. And if we could save even one person from that... And if I'm going down, I'm gonna make sure these bastards remember my fucking name.
Has a way with words, doesn't he?
No, not really. I mean, as far as speeches go, that wasn't very good in my opinion. This feels like the writing is telling me that his speech was compelling while lacking the quality to have actually delivered a compelling speech. Well, that's all it took, apparently. Now everyone is hyped to storm the space station and try to knock it out of orbit. There's 2 space elevators, so the units split up into 2 teams and both take one, with Jammer leading one unit to try and access the comm center to warn Earth, and Sev, Rico, and Narville heading the other to try to destabilize the station itself. Here we go, just like in the finale of Killzone 1, we're mounting up to take the fight upward. Straight into space! While we've been fighting for our lives, this little dispute between Autarch Orlok and Chairman Stahl has still been ongoing, and it looks like that'll be resolving itself soon enough. Hopefully that'll keep them distracted while we finish this. Also, I gotta point out that this is a good space station design. I was very critical of Killzone 1's space station for not looking sci-fi enough to mesh with what the game was telling us it was, but this one looks on point. If you're going to have the last level of your sci-fi wargame be on a space station, make it look like this. While we're putting to rest what's left of Visari's best, Orlok and Stahl meet up for their fateful encounter. This is such a weird subplot to me. Like, I enjoy how it adds some level of complexity, but it also feels like the only reason it's here is to add some level of complexity. Like they were worried their story would be too different from the second game if they didn't have some kind of political nuance, but I think they forgot to make it interesting. Orlok is such a forgettable character because he has nothing to him. His entire personality is just the other bad guy who wants power and doesn't like the main bad guy. Visari was interesting because although his methods were insane, you could tell he really meant what he said. His hatred for Vecta and his feelings of leading his scorned people to a path of what he thought was justice felt real. Orlok has almost no lines in the game that aren't either about stopping the ISA or disliking Stahl. Speaking of Stahl, he isn't much better. His only real motivation here seems to be acquiring more power by any means necessary. Oh yeah, and predictably, the two are trying to kill each other here, and there's a clear split loyalty with some soldiers choosing to follow Stahl's promises of a better lifestyle. Stahl even shows off his new shielding technology to prove why he should be in charge. The two then actually start trying to kill each other, like for real, and I kept expecting to hear Orlok say his motivation or ideal or why he should be in charge, but that doesn't happen because that would have required writing him to have a motivation besides existing to be a foil for Stahl. Also, the Helghast fleet starts firing on itself as a skirmish between Stahl's and Orlok's soldiers breaks out around us. So there's a space battle happening outside now between two newly formed sects of Helghast. Sev gets the idea that we should commandeer one of those fighters, and Rico calls to ask Jammer for directions to the hangar, but it looks like she's a little busy.
Way ahead of you, boss.
All right, troops. This is our chance. We'll regroup at Pier 2 and take command of the strike ships. It's the only way we can prevent Stahl's cruiser from reaching Earth. Let's head out! This is it, boys.
I'm gonna be honest here. I was all but convinced at this point that a betrayal from Captain Narville was imminent. Halfway through the game, I started to become suspicious of his character. His attitude had cascaded from brash, rough, and war-ready in the second game to solemn, reserved, and even seemingly guilty in this one. Not to mention how this game seemed to be trying to hit a lot of the same beats as the first Killzone, even taking us into space again for the last mission. I really thought they were going to go for a twist here where Narville is revealed to have sold out to Admiral Orlok during the 6 months they were underground, and he was going to matter to this internal leadership conflict with the Helghast. We've already seen how Stahl bought off some of Orlok's men, which laid the groundwork for betrayal. I figured Narville was going to reveal himself as a traitor similar to General Adams in Killzone 1, and the big dispute between Orlok and Stahl would end up being the only reason his treason failed. The Helghast finding their camp right as Sev happened to find the comm device they needed, and his constant orders to his men to stand down over and over. Pretty much everything that got accomplished in this game was in defiance of Narville's orders to stand down and regroup, which regrouping would make it easier for the Helghast to kill all of the remaining ISA soldiers in one swoop. And when I say his constant orders, I mean pretty much once per mission, Narville is ordering Sev and Rico to stand down and pull back. And their defiance of that order becomes the only reason things get done. Not to mention, he seems almost ashamed every time the ISA pulls off a victory. It would have also explained the huge shift in his character as well and why he's been acting so different now. None of that happens though. Narville just made a bunch of bad calls because he was scared of getting his men killed, which, fair enough I guess. But seriously, replay through the game sometime and tell me the seeds aren't being planted for him to betray us here. I'm actually still very suspicious that he was supposed to be a traitor through a lot of the game's production. It just feels like that to me. I'm not convinced that wasn't planned to happen at some point. Oh yeah, I forgot to talk about the zero gravity in this level. As we're fighting, the gravity generator gets knocked offline and we get to see bodies and objects floating all over the place, not to mention jump really far. To be honest, trying to play Killzone 3 with no gravity just makes it feel more like playing Killzone 2 for a bit. It was cool, and I'm glad they bothered trying to implement something like this. While we're pushing our way to the hangar though, Stahl finally gets one over on Orlok, trapping him underneath some kind of terminal. Orlok tries his best to convince Stahl not to go through with the attack, claiming his attack will end up killing the Helghan people, which sends Stahl into a monologue about his plans to use his irradiated Petricite weapons to totally eradicate the population of Earth, leaving no major threat to him or Helghan, and then intimidating the rest of the colonies to fall in line under his control. Orlok then fires off a shot at Stahl, misses, and Stahl blows Orlok up in a way I don't think I can show on YouTube. Well, that's that subplot resolved, I guess. I do like the detail of Orlok using the blue Petricite weapon from Killzone 2, and Stahl using the green one from this game as a kind of representation of the two sides. Stahl then commands his men to have the space station destroyed in full, which means we need to get the hell off of this thing before that happens. Fortunately, we're almost there. Have I mentioned how satisfying the counterattacks are in this game, by the way? Seriously, these melee animations are just so damn cool to pull off. Making it to the launch bay, what's left of the ISA forces load into a handful of Helghan starfighters and punch it into space. You know what that means. Another on-the-rails vehicle section. And it's also really cool. Rico pilots the fighter while we're on the main guns. Stahl is escaping from the station on his fighter and heading back for his own capital ship, likely to commence his attack on Earth. I can't praise the visuals of this game enough either. I'm like a broken record, but look how cool this all is. Either way, we aren't able to stop Stahl in time, and he manages to board his ship.
Take us to Wall, now! Warp drive's online! He's going for Earth! Not gonna let that happen. Jammer, target the guns and the engines!
We are out of time. That one ship alone would be enough to push Earth's population to extinction with the weapons Stahl has on there. Sev tells Rico and Jammer to focus all fire on the warp coil for Stahl's ship to keep him from launching, and after making a few rounds across the ship's hull, we're able to blow its warp coil to dust.
He's gonna land!
Yeah, I don't think so.
It's not over yet. We can't let him land that ship. Rico angles the fighter and we descend straight down towards Stahl as Sev preps the nuclear missile we apparently have outfitted on this thing. Wait, does every one of these fighters have a nuke on it? That feels like such a bad idea for so many reasons. Whatever, we're past logic. Let's just finish this.
Hooper, move!
Damn, are you there? Damn, respond!
What did I tell you guys about leaving before the explosion starts?
Guys, looks like we'll be coming up on the space station in a second.
Oh my god.
I'm not hearing any comm traffic.
Yeah.
We took out the whole fleet.
I mean nothing. The entire planet is silent.
Jesus, how many people were down there?
And that's Killzone 3. Yeah, it just ends abruptly right after implying we erased and irradiated an entire planet full of people. That's kind of insane. But don't worry, in true Marvel movie ripoff fashion, we get a post-credit scene where a couple of Helgen soldiers find the wreckage of Stahl's ship, revealing he's still alive.
Welcome home, sir.
Where do I even start with my thoughts on this story? It's so chaotic and all over the place. It's certainly not bad, let me just say that right now, but it does feel unsure of itself. While doing my research for this game, I found some dialogue surrounding its tone where game director Mathis de Jong says he wanted to cut way back on the amount of swearing seen in Killzone 3 compared to Killzone 2, saying he felt it was gratuitous in that game and that it's more impactful in this one. Along with that, I saw some sentiments from Guerrilla that Killzone 2 suffered from what they felt was an overly serious and grim tone, so they wanted to make this one more lighthearted. I have to say that while there is noticeably less swearing in Killzone 3, it feels like there's so much more in a bad way. In Killzone 2, there was so much of it that you just didn't ever even notice it. Every character swore so often that it just felt like part of the war. I don't know if you guys have ever been around a veteran before, but I've known many in my life, and let me tell you, all of the ones I've known swear a lot. Granted, that's anecdotal, but my understanding, while not ever having been in the military myself, is that it's just part of the culture. They swear a lot. If I'm wrong on that, feel free to correct me in the comments. I'm speaking totally anecdotally here. As for the reduction of swearing in Killzone 3, it just ends up making it feel really out of place every time I hear a character do it. Like I'm watching a movie that desperately wants to be PG-13 to appeal to more audiences, but doesn't want to lose its edgy nature in the process, and so it ends up just feeling try-hard. Make up your mind, Killzone. Do you want to be a dark military action game or a superhero movie? The lack of identity between these entries is giving me whiplash. Also, I saw a line where Guerrilla apparently claimed that the character development was significantly improved in this game over the second one. Let's look at that, shall we? Do you know what character needed to have an arc? Which character was in desperate need of development? Rico. In the first game, he displayed a hatred towards the Helghast and a quickness towards anger that nearly caused him to kill an innocent Helghast who was on their side. He did have a small development at the end of that game where he saved Haka from dying though, so good. Now in the second game, Rico's anger issues and ego caused him to get Sev's friend Garza killed, and then after losing his friend Templar, he assaulted and reprimanded his own allies repeatedly, like literally physically attacking his own subordinates for backtalking him. And then even worse, after they had captured Visari alive, succeeded in their mission, and basically won, he threw it all away along with the sacrifices of all of his comrades by killing Visari because he was goaded into it. Rico's character needed more than a little arc. He needed his quickness to anger to cost him something in this game that we could see him express genuine remorse and have a real change over. You know, develop. The closest we get to this is after Sev asks Rico nicely to try and follow orders, and he makes an effort to do so by calling in and asking what Narville's orders are before acting on his own. That's it. And also after his orders are given, he disagrees with them and then goes to yell at Narville for his decision, which he's also proven right to have done because Rico doesn't really make any mistakes in this game. He's like a Gary Stu, which is weird because he's not even the main character. I don't really understand why, but Rico is this trilogy's favorite character by a country mile, and in no game is that more apparent than this one. Nearly every call Rico makes is the right one, and this game basically goes out of its way to reward him for his temper and quickness to anger. As for Narville, man, I don't even know what happened here. It's like I said earlier, I feel like this game totally altered Narville's character so that he could be the one having to learn lessons and grow as a character in order to avoid making Rico's character have to. It's insane, and I feel psychotic even pointing this out. But in Killzone 2, Narville was like a brazen, war-ready, testosterone-fueled drill sergeant machine.
Wanna knock on Visari's door inside the hour? Come on, war's not over! Keep it moving! No one called a timeout! Move! Move! You call yourselves Marines? Get on your feet, goddammit!
If we go out there, we can kiss our asses goodbye.
They even gave him like a southern accent and everything. Sure, maybe he was a bit one note, but I wasn't exactly excited to see a story about that character regressing and then making every wrong call conceivable just to see Rico be mad about it the whole time. I was compelled to see how Rico faced up to his enormous mistake, how it changed and humbled him, and how Sev and Rico could learn to work together in spite of how much tension there was between them. Well, the answer ended up being that he didn't learn anything because he was always right, and Sev immediately forgives him for everything because they're best friends and always have been. These characters were on a trajectory towards an arc that never happens because this game erases the characters of Killzone 2 to replace them with totally different ones in order to continue the plotline set up in that game. Except for Rico, he's still practically the same. Oh yeah, and let's talk about Sev's arc, if you could call it that. Throughout most of the game, Sev just follows orders and encourages Rico to do the same. Then near the end, he gets frustrated with the amount of tension between Narville and Rico and steps up to the plate to become the new leader since he's the only level-headed character here who's willing to do what it takes to stop the Helghast. That's it. I mean, it's simple, but at least he does have an observable arc, I guess. Man, for the most part, no one is learning anything or growing in any major or satisfying way here except Captain Narville, who had to be rewritten into a completely different character just to justify giving him an arc and avoiding addressing Rico's anger problems, which caused him to attack his own men and completely fail the entire mission last game. It's just a narrative mess. If you ignore the last game and only look at the characters of this game as their own entities, then this is all fine, I think. It only falls apart if you try to play the two games back to back because it's so jarring. However, you can't really afford to separate the two games because the entire plot of Killzone 3 is intrinsically tied to the events of Killzone 2. It's like the characters of Killzone 3 want to ignore the last game, but the plot wants to marry it. I think I've pretty much said all I have to say about the story. It's not bad by any means. In fact, I think it's a really fun time with some incredible set pieces and a plot that's more than passable enough to make the whole thing work. It's a great story in its own right. I just don't think it's a very good sequel story to Killzone 2. Now, before we wrap this all up, as always, there's a few more things I want to talk about. Starting with the multiplayer. Now available to players in Killzone 3 is a split-screen co-op campaign allowing players to experience the entire Killzone 3 story with a friend. And for those who had online friends they were hoping to play with, the co-op even supported online play at the time too. There's not much more to say on that, but it is cool that this game's story mode can be played cooperatively. Killzone 3's competitive multiplayer mode is very much like its counterpart, only better. The same game modes return from Killzone 2, plus a new game mode that adds a new level of cinematic immersion to the gameplay. The mode called Guerrilla Warfare is your classic team deathmatch style game mode featuring up to 16 players across a variety of interesting maps. This mode is a must-have in pretty much any competent multiplayer FPS. The second mode returning from Killzone 2 is called Warzone and features changing objectives scattered throughout a single match for teams to compete against one another to complete. These objectives cycle between 7 available options, such as capture and hold, search and retrieve, search and destroy, assassination, and body count. The final mode is the newly introduced one called Operations, and although it plays very similarly to the Warzone mode, the biggest difference is that each match has multiple phases, and upon the completion of each phase, a cinematic will play showing 3 characters performing certain actions. The big kicker here is that the 3 characters on screen will always have gamer tags over them, representing the 3 best performing players, with the top player being the one performing the action itself. These cutscenes are actually really amusing and a great way to incentivize players to push for being in the top 3. I actually played a little bit of Killzone 3's multiplayer way back when it first came out, and I vaguely remember how competitive I would get to try and see my character in these cutscenes. The maps are really well designed and all feature really cool sequences to look at, with one map even showing us multiple maulers stomping around blowing up ISA jeeps. I mean, come on. This is so cool and makes for a great multiplayer map backdrop. I miss when games used to take themselves and their own universes this seriously. The class system also returns, with characters being able to choose which type of character they want to play from a selection of available classes. These classes are the Marksman, Engineer, Field Medic, Tactician, and Infiltrator. Each of them has their own strengths, like the Engineer building turrets and the Medic being able to heal people, etc. Like I said about Killzone 2, this is all very much like a gritty sci-fi version of Team Fortress 2. Now, I know I rant about wanting a PC port near the end of talking about these games, so I'm going to keep it short this time. Killzone 3, obviously, deserves a PC port. I mean, it just does. If not for the exciting and visually spectacular story mode, then for the multiplayer mode. I don't even really play multiplayer games anymore, but I'm telling you that if this game came to PC with a proper port on Steam or something, I'm a little worried about how much time I'd lose just pouring my hours into playing this game's multiplayer mode. It may only be limited to 8 maps, but it's just so damn fun. The classes, the modes, the satisfying killstreak text, the melee execution animations, and fighting to see yourself in a cutscene, all built inside of a super gritty sci-fi universe. Sign me up twice, man. I would pre-order a PC port of this game, and I don't pre-order anything. Outside of the multiplayer mode though, if players did walk away from Killzone 3 still hungry for some more story content and wanted extra details and context about Sev, Rico, and the other characters, then there was always the book. The Killzone universe only ever saw one tie-in novel called Killzone Ascendancy by author Sam Bradbury, which acts as a direct adaptation of the events from the third game, and honestly, this decision kind of confuses me. I mean, for starters, Killzone 3 has so many cutscenes that it sometimes feels more like watching a movie than playing a video game. There's more cutscenes in this game than the first two combined, so why would anyone want to novelize this story when the first game already felt more like a novel and could have used the polish way more? Secondly, why adapt a story at all? This universe is rich with potential. We could have had a book that tied into the events of Killzone 3 but followed other characters like Luger or something. Show me what's happening on Vector right now. Have someone fighting off a Helghast strike team attempting to assassinate a Vectan leader or something. Anything. Give me a book about Visari's rise to power, where we learn more about him and the other Helghast characters we saw in Killzone 3's opening. Or, hey, how about a novel set in the 6-month time skip from the game? Show us what Narville and Sev were doing to stay alive and stay hidden in the hellish Helgen wilderness, and how Rico and Jammer became a raiding party and hit the Helghast with guerrilla warfare. There's so much they could have done, but they opted to retell the events from the game, which are already told in the most bombastic cinematic way you could experience them in the game itself. Either way, that is the only Killzone book we've ever gotten, but if the series ever comes back, perhaps we'll see more. As for the music of Killzone 3, I mean, quite frankly, this is the best it's been so far. Composer Joris Deman has returned to create the score for the conclusion to the Killzone trilogy, and there were times where the attempts at creating a lighter tone in the story almost seemed to insult the music he created here. Like I mentioned before, the opening track of the game itself is a solemn, soft track that lays the foundation for the impact of the last game's events, and the rest of the tracks continue to feature gorgeous symphonies of strings, brass, and intense percussion. This is a full orchestral score that totally embraces all of the leitmotifs we've heard before while introducing new elements to represent characters like Stahl. The choirs are back and better utilized than ever before, and all of the synthetic elements from Killzone 2 are back as well to make sure we remember that although this is a space opera, it's also a sci-fi game. Pulsing synths weave their way through pounding percussion to the tune of a dozen cellos and a full choir. The music for Killzone has only gotten better with every entry, and this is the best it's been. There were times where listening to the music made me feel like the composer Joris understood what this universe was supposed to feel like more than the people writing the story did. I don't really know how to explain that feeling, and so I won't bother trying to elaborate on it. I'm just telling you that I felt that. Although Killzone 3 did perform very well critically overall, its reception was significantly more mixed than that of its predecessor. Looking at Killzone 3's Metacritic shows a score of 84, which is quite the drop from the second game's powerful 91. Most critics found Killzone 3 to be a powerhouse of a PS3 game, with Destructoid even giving it a perfect 10 out of 10 score. Other critics, however, found the game's narrative to be weaker overall than the last game, with Games TM stating that Killzone 3's story took, quote, Inexplicable backward steps in almost every department, end quote. Which I clearly agree with given my previous sentiments. I do have to say though, I think it's very telling that all of the criticisms of this game are normally directed at the narrative. Not as in the story is that bad or anything, I mean it's not even bad at all, but what I'm saying is that the rest of the game is just that damn good. I mean, if we're being very honest here, Killzone 2 does not play very well, and if someone asked me which game I'd rather play, I'd probably say 3 because it's easily one of the smoothest FPS games on the PS3, bar none. I mean, I like Killzone 2 more. I like its characters, its set pieces, its atmosphere, all of it. Playing Killzone 2 is like watching a serious blockbuster movie, whereas Killzone 3 feels more like watching an action-adventure movie. I'd say it's like going from watching The Dark Knight to watching the first Avengers movie. Both are good in their own right, but you certainly wouldn't have wanted the sequel to The Dark Knight to feel like the Avengers, would you? That's kinda what we got here in my opinion in terms of story and tone. But again, Killzone 3's gameplay, its mechanics, pretty much everything about it as a video game are far superior to anything we've seen in the series so far. It just seems obvious to me that Killzone 2's critical acclaim wasn't enough in light of its underwhelming financial performance being even worse than the publisher expectations. And someone, somewhere, be it at Sony or Guerrilla Games, had the power to say they needed to course correct. And although those course corrections may have resulted in more mass appeal, although I'm not sure if they did or not, I think I can confidently say that they have further cemented this franchise's growing identity crisis. In conclusion, Killzone 3 is one of the best first-person shooters I've ever played, but that greatness comes at a cost when it rests inside the shadow of its own potential. Thanks so much for sticking around and watching the video, everybody. This one was a lot, as you can see, and I had to really struggle to figure out how to articulate what I was feeling about the game. I hope I was able to do so in a way that resonates with you guys while both being respectful to the game and its developers and expressing my disappointment in its shortcomings. I've got 2 more Killzone games to go now, and all I can say is that I hope Shadowfall isn't as bad as everyone says. If you're looking forward to my coverage on those games, then I'd ask that you like the video, leave a comment to help with the algorithm, and of course, subscribe. Also consider becoming a member of the channel to get early access to certain videos, live stream replays, and exclusive posts. Not to mention, you'll be helping me out financially and supporting the quest to shine a spotlight on these older games that deserve to be talked about more. Thanks again everyone so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. But until then, that's all I've got for you.